palatial old bungalows tell the story of a bygone era. Hello and welcome to this special series where we go deep into India to trace the story of Indian entrepreneurship and the journeys of some of India's most famous business communities. We start the journey here in Karaikudi, in Chettinad in Tamil Nadu. It is from here that the Natukottai Chettiars rose to build Asian business empires in the 18th and 19th centuries. But is that when their story really started? The ancient Pillayar temple close to Karaikudi in Chettinad is one of the oldest and most famous of the 9 clan temples the small but affluent Chettiars still align themselves to. This temple, along with 8 others, spread across the district of Chettinad, were granted to the community by the Pandya kings who ruled this land in the 13th century. But the history of the small and affluent Chettiars, who at one time were the financiers to Southeast Asia, is still shrouded in mystery. How far back do they go? Were they part of the old trade networks forged when the Cholas ventured out to conquer new worlds? Or did they rise as the British port city of Madras came up? In Chennai, Meenakshi Mayappan, author of many books on Chettiyar history, culture and cuisine, tells us of a popular legend among the Chettiars on their origins and how they landed in Chettinad.
The story is that originally we came from Kanchipuram, and the Chola king there abducted one of our women. So all the women in the community en masse committed suicide. And then the Chettiars realized they couldn't live under the Chola kings and moved, and the Pandya Raja at that time gave them the land in Chettinad, and that's how they moved there and married en masse women from Tirunelveli.
Part of the legend of the Chettiars is the old port of Puhar or Pumpahar, later known as Kaveri Patnam. An important early Chola seaport, it is believed to have been destroyed by a tsunami in the medieval period. While there is little memory of the grand port, the Chettiars have a close link with it.
I've only been to Pumpahar once, but it has been the port that the Chettiars used, and every July they conduct a festival in which they enact the Chettiyar history for over a period of 10 days.
Given the poor record keeping through Indian history, it is hard to trace the early history of this business community. In Bengaluru, business historian Raman Mahadevan, who has studied the community's journey for the last 3 decades, says that though legends abound and there could be truth in the oral traditions, he would trace the rise of this business community to the late 18th and early 19th century.
They were originally traders, at least that is what the available evidence suggests, pertaining to the late 18th and early 19th century. They were originally salt traders. Trade was localized to Tamil region, but around the early 19th century, you see them one big change occurring, which is that the scale of operation expands, and so does the commodity composition of the trade. And it would appear that the shift from local to interregional and then on to Colombo and in Ceylon. So this is where it would seem that in the first quarter of the 19th century or so, there are the first signs of their shifting to some form of rudimentary banking. Also, this is the period when the British banks had not arrived in Ceylon, and there was obviously a pent-up demand for credit, and some of the Chettiars, it would seem, took up banking as a supplementary or a subsidiary activity to trading to meet this growing demand for credit in Ceylon.
This was the start of the spread across Asia and the Chettiars dominating the new city of Madras, which was being built. It is estimated that by the late 19th century, around 200 Chettiyar families owned a large part of land in Madras, as it was used as a collateral for the money lent. The coming of the British in Madras resulted in the creation of a new economic space, whether it was banking, trade or investment in infrastructure, that is railways and plantations. A new order was being created and India was being integrated into the global economy. The Chettiars were quick to throw in their hat and align with the European managing agencies, often acting as financiers as they ventured into Southeast Asia, especially Burma and Malaysia.
The organized movement of Chettiyar capital to the overseas starts sometime around the mid-19th century, but really picks up steam after 1870s, following the opening up of the Suez Canal in 1869 and the consequent sharp reduction in the travel time and distance between Europe and India provides an enormous boost to the markets. So it is only after this that from 1870s, 80s onwards that there is a very significant outflow of Chettiyar capital from South India to all these parts. I mean, Burma was being opened, and it coincides with the opening up of these regions to colonial commercialization and crop specialization. Burma emerged as the major rice producer for the world, between 1870s and 1920. Malaysia ended up as one of the major producers of rubber and tin. Sri Lanka was cast as a plantation economy. So it is precisely at this time when these regions were being exposed to the forces of, shall I say, commercialization, and where there was a demand for credit, that the Chettiars, as shrewd businessmen, were able to perceive the opportunities for investment in these regions and move out of South India.
Sadly, the Chettiyar mansions in Karaikudi are today the only reminders of a glorious past. There is little memory of the role the Chettiyar bankers played in financing and so transforming Southeast Asian economies, be it Burma or Malaysia. Historian Raman Mahadevan believes that the greatest success of the Chettiyar community lay in their ability to spot a chance to make money anywhere.
Their business acumen and ability to entrepreneurial ability to sense the opportunities which were emerging in the course of the 19th century, late 19th and early 20th century, and seize those opportunities and through the kind of system which they developed of networked banking. I think that's what enabled them to, in a sense, emerge as an economic force in South India. After all, it has been estimated that in 1890, their population was roughly 10,000, and their total assets, according to, of course, these are all rough estimates, according to this estimate, according to one estimate, their total assets was worth 10 crores. But by 1930, their population had increased to 50,000 and their assets were worth 150 crores. It's a phenomenal growth in a matter of, 30 odd years, 40 years.
This also marked the peak of the Chettiars in business. An economic depression, the world wars, the Japanese takeover of the region and the strife that followed forced them to leave their businesses and land.
It was really the depression of the 1930s which triggered this crisis. The depression itself resulted in in industrial recession and therefore a fall in demand for primary products from these various countries, the colonies, and that resulted in the sharp fall in the price of primary products. I mean, whether it was rubber, whether it was rice, whether it was tea, and with the result that the debtors who had taken loans from the Chettiars by providing land or immovable assets as collateral were unable to, repay the loans. So they were saddled with land, which was, not worth very much at that point of time, because given the sharp fall in prices and the depressed land market. So many of them, it has been estimated that as many as 400 of the 1,650 firms which were operating in Burma in 1930, about 400 firms collapsed.
It was a crisis that the community just couldn't get over, and many believe that the golden days of the Chettiars ended nearly 80 years ago. But in the world of business, you can still come across some powerful Chettiar empires built by men who were quick to shift track and embrace change. In their prime, the Chettiars were among the most powerful business communities of India. But in many senses, the golden days for the Chettiars ended with the Second World War, when most of them were forced to leave Burma and Southeast Asia. Not only did they lose all the wealth they made, they also lost the thousands of acres of land that they had got. Most didn't recover, while some were astute enough to see the signs early. M.V. Subbaiah, the former chairman of the powerful $4 billion Murugappa Group, that is a conglomerate spanning across sectors as diverse as fertilizers and finance, explains how his family made the shift to industry.
When the war came in, my father said, look, there are things which the Brits are going to sell in India and walk away because they like to run away from where the war zone is. So they are starting to sell in Burma, they were selling in Singapore, Malaysia, as well as in India. It will be a time when they'll sell in India and go buy them at that time. And that's why I bought Jaya spinning mills and also the rubber estate. So when others were not...
But both were astute. I've heard the Jaya mills was largely because of the silk parachutes that were made.
Silk.
And of course the rubber plantation, because by then the automobile industry had taken off in Europe, and with crisis in Malaysia, so they were astute decisions to take at that point.
No, he was very well informed. My father and my uncles that way were for their background, they're extremely well informed. And they socialized. I think one of the main things is very few Chettiars in Burma or in India socialized with the local people as well as with the Europeans, which is where my father scored. I mean, he used to play tennis and even in Burma, and so he had to play with the officers and the army officers as well as the bureaucracy.
When the war happened and the crisis happened and there was revolutionary fervor in Burma, it was a tragic time because you lost your father at that time. It was also a time when he actually represented the Chettiar community in negotiations with them.
Absolutely.
But very little, and because of that tragic incident, I mean, the family withdrew from there. What happened to the Chettiars' lands over there? I mean, were they just simply lost?
Everything lost.
Everything lost.
Well, I think the whole, the estimation, there's only an estimation or a guesstimation is about just over 1.5 million acres were lost altogether of paddy fields and also a lot of timber.
It is said that the Chettiars never, as a community, never got out of that. I mean, they never got back onto their feet. What is your assessment of the post-war period when they come back?
I think, you see, you got to go back in history then to understand the community and the community. Even today, the community size is only 120,000 people world over, and 20% of that lives abroad. Now, before 1940, everybody went into the money lending business. No one thought of education as an important element, because education was part of the money lending business training system.
Today, the Chettiyar community is scattered around the world, and only a few youngsters are following traditions and going into business. Interestingly, Subbiah says that he was the last of his generation who went through the stringent apprenticeship system that all young Chettiyar boys had to. Divided into 5 stages, it defined a system of grooming that seems to have worked well.
5 stages of training: Podiyan, Aduthal or Kanakappillai, Kootali, Pangali and Mudalali. You are trained to become an entrepreneur. Podiyan is a peon or the office boy. The next stage is Kanakappillai, which is the accountant, cashier come accountant. You had to write the accounts, and then you became or you became an assistant in the marketplace. You went and lent money or collected money, or you did all the 3 jobs. Then the third stage was Kootali. You become a partner. So you had they gave you a small area, territorial area, and asked you to become a partner there and become a branch manager there. And then each time your salary was, you lived with the family, therefore you didn't have any expenses. You stayed there. So all your salary was accumulated and was earning interest, which they gave for anybody else. So that when you're an agent and collecting money and things, so that you really no expenses there. A very simple lifestyle. So you were then when you're an agent, you go around a certain territory and then you look after that and you get a commission on that. So literally there was a front-end capital picked up for you as you work. So then you became a Mudalali. So they gave you a territory which is much larger, consisting of 4 or 5 districts maybe, and say you money lend in that area, go and start a branch there for us, and you take 25% of the capital with the money that you saved, and the balance 75% we'll put in. So, which is what they did.
So this is like serial entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
35 to 1600 would have happened this way.
Exactly. That's how it happened.
Subbiah believes that the apprenticeship system that he went through underlines the principles of the Chettiyar way of doing business: humility, piety, and a strong sense of ethics.
So if you go around in the south, anywhere in the south, in fact, not even the south, right from Kashi to Kanyakumari or to Rameshwaram, everywhere you have temples and chowdhuries built by Chettiars between 1900 to even today, to the Kashi Vishwanathar, the puja materials are sent by the Chettiyar chowdhury. Even today.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The materials, the milk, flowers, coconuts, everything go from the Chettiyar thing today. We still have the rights. The Maharaja of Banaras in those days gave the rights to the Chettiars because he had so much confidence. See, why am I saying this? Because it is to do with this giving back to the society. Certain percentage of every year's, before you began the year, you said so much percentage will be given for charity or for religious purposes.
It is amazing how old networks of business communities had such deep connects with India and through it. Who would imagine that the Chettiyar community from Chettinad supports the last puja of the Kashi Vishwanath temple in Banaras even today? For Subbiah and his generation, however, the biggest concern now is not the past and the old glory of the Chettiars, but the future, the youngsters, and how to drive the spirit of entrepreneurship in them and ensure they remain connected with their roots. A fund for startups and digital content on Chettiyar culture and traditional education is taking a lot of this industrialist's time after he stepped down as the head of the Murugappa group in 2004. The transition to the next generation of leaders within the group was smooth, guided once again by the tenets of doing business the Chettiyar way.
I mean, as I said, we have 3 tenets only altogether. There's nothing else to guide us. The first one is from the Arthashastra, which my grandfather had sort of casually mentioned. No man you transact with will lose, then you shall not. So if you're transacting with anybody, whether it's with a union or whether it's with a customer or a supplier or anybody, you must make sure that he goes back smiling. Then if he goes back smiling, then you win. That's the first thing. So follow the Arthashastra. Second one is, as I said, from Tirukkural, once you start making money, give back to society, because the water in the well in your house is available only for your family. So if you do well in business, share it by building a temple tank, which is exactly what my grandfather did when he started making money. Built the first temple tank, and the second time when he built the hospital. When he went to Burma and came back, he built the hospital in 1924. So we still do this. So if you start sharing it, then the joy of that will make sure that, look, if I stop now, don't make some stupid mistakes in my business, it's not going to affect my family alone. It's going to affect the 10,000 children who go to school, the 1,500 polytechnic students, and the 1 million patients that come and attend the hospitals. The third principle is retiring at 65. Yeah. It's a very interesting thing. I didn't realize it till John pushed me into it and said, look, why your grandfather said we don't know, we must find out, there must be a reason. So I've done some homework on that, and we found from the Vedas, it says very simple, don't be like a mango, because when it's totally ripe, it'll get hurt before it's used. It'll get thrown by a stone, by a young boy, or it'll fall down on by itself and get damaged, or it'll be bit by a squirrel or a bird. In any which way, it'll get damaged. Don't be like that. Be like a cucumber or a pumpkin. Keep your feet on the ground. Come away from the stem quietly when you're ready. And that's the age of 65, which he put down.
That is an important lesson for all businessmen today. The enterprising Chettiars left behind a multi-hued legacy. From timeless wisdom on how to run businesses to much more everyday, tangible heritage still being kept alive here in Chettinad. The old bungalows of Chettinad tell the story of the rise and spread of Chettiars across oceans. The opulence talk of riches from far, the chandeliers of the European influence, and the tiles of the colour that wealth brought into this otherwise arid land. The bungalow, an early 20th century outhouse which the gentlemen used for leisure, is today one of the few places where you can find a slice of how well-heeled Chettiars lived in their prime. Deep tiled verandas, four-poster beds, and of course the cuisine that has made this region so famous. The bungalow is run by an old Chettiyar family, and Meenakshi Mayappan is the lady running the show. Over a sumptuous lunch of all the famed Chettinad fairs, she tells me how her family restored the bungalow and how tough it has been for most.
The entry to the bungalow, it's the lobby area, that was built in 1916, and it was falling apart. So my son said that we should either restore it or demolish it. It was very badly damaged. There was water logging on the roof up there, and that roof had collapsed. So then again he said, you know, various generations of grandfathers have built it, we shouldn't demolish it, let us restore it and start with 4 rooms. So we started with 4 rooms in that building. The next building was also there. That's an Art Deco building. So we added 4 rooms there. And till 2004, we went on with 8 rooms. And then after that, we built another block of 12 rooms, but it matches. You know, you can't see that.
You know, it is said that there were so many old palatial mansions in this region. A lot of them have just gone to dust. What is the state of the restoration? Because I know you've written a book on the Chettiyar heritage. You've really working towards restoring some of this. What is the status right now? How many houses would have been restored? I mean, or have we lost more than we have saved?
Oh yes, very much more than what we have saved. We have lost. Yeah. See, we estimate, I don't know at the beginning how many there were, but there was at a time 25,000 quite recently, because we comprise 76 villages, and a good deal of them have been demolished. Now they estimate only 10,000 buildings left. And the antique dealer tells me that on an average 20 houses get demolished every month. That's a lot.
But it's very tough to manage these. I mean, because
very, it's expensive, and it's tough.
Around 400 kilometers from Chennai, getting to Chettinad is a hike, but when we were there were many tourists as well as visitors from close by, Madurai and Trichy, all come for a sumptuous meal. Chettinad cuisine is an interesting blend of spices and meats, and they do tell the story of far-off lands. Chettinad food is so famous, so I think this is the best way to wind down a conversation on the contribution of the Chettiars on Indian business. But how is this different? What are the main ingredients of something like this?
We use a lot more pepper and a lot more tamarind than we use chilies. And our chilies are particular to Tamil Nadu. They're round and we call them Gundu Molaga. It comes from Ramanathapuram. You know, the Chettiars overseas, when they came, they brought back pepper and they brought back aniseed and various spices from the Far East.
This Chettinad food may well be the most famous export to the rest of India from this land. And interestingly, most people know this area because of it. But with efforts to hold on to the cultural legacy and the entrepreneurial spirit that this community was famous for, attempts are being made to ensure that the new generations of Chettiars spread across the world remain connected with their roots.